Hello, and welcome to this chapter on scaling Scrum for large projects. This chapter emphasizes additional aspects of Scrum that are usually applicable for large projects. Scaling Scrum for large projects as defined in A Guide to the Scrum Body of Knowledge, SBOK Guide, is applicable to the following. Large projects in any industry, products, services, or any other results to be delivered to business stakeholders. The term product in the SBOK guide may refer to a product, service, or other deliverable. Scrum can not only be applied effectively to small projects in any industry, but also to large, complex projects which may have hundreds of people assigned to many teams. In addition to the impacts that a large project can have on the fundamental Scrum processes, this chapter introduces additional inputs, tools, and outputs that could apply to large projects. To facilitate the best application of the Scrum framework, this chapter identifies additional inputs, tools, and outputs as either mandatory or optional. Inputs, tools, and outputs denoted by asterisks, star are mandatory or considered critical for project success, whereas those with no asterisks are optional. It is recommended that the Scrum team and those individuals being introduced to the Scrum framework and processes focus primarily on the mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs, while chief product owners, chief Scrum masters, and other more experienced Scrum practitioners strive to attain a more thorough knowledge of the information in this entire chapter. It is also important to realize that although all processes are defined uniquely in the SBOK guide, they are not necessarily performed sequentially or separately. At times, it may be more appropriate to combine some processes in parallel, depending on the specific requirements of each project. This chapter is written from the perspective of a large project effort that coordinates activities of multiple Scrum teams to jointly produce potentially shippable product increments, deliverables. Additional information pertaining to the application of Scrum to any project, large or small, can be found under Scrum Principles and Scrum Aspects. The next concept we shall learn is about large Scrum project versus typical small Scrum project. The fundamental Scrum processes are valid for Scrum projects with one product owner, one Scrum master, and 1 to 3 Scrum teams. These are usually considered small Scrum projects. When dealing with large projects requiring the efforts of 4 or more Scrum teams with multiple product owners and multiple Scrum masters, the fundamental processes remain valid, but some additional considerations and updates to inputs, tools, and outputs may be required. This may include additional coordination and synchronization efforts. The impact to these fundamental Scrum processes when scaling Scrum to large projects are described in this chapter. The definition of what constitutes a large project usually depends on the organization and/or the complexity of the projects being undertaken. A key criterion for whether the project requires multiple Scrum masters and/or multiple product owners. If the project still requires only one Scrum master and one product owner, then these individuals can normally handle any additional communication and synchronization efforts required by the project. Some reasons additional inputs, tools, and outputs would be needed for large projects are as follows. For Scrum teams, increased interaction and dependencies among Scrum teams as complexity increases for a large project. Need to manage conflicts, resolve issues, manage dependencies, and set priorities among all the Scrum teams. Requirement for specialization, as some Scrum teams may require specialized resources for specific tasks, and these particular skill sets are not needed on all Scrum teams. Necessity to define certain guidelines and standards that should be adhered to by all Scrum teams. For example, security standards within a company or legal and governmental guidelines for specific industries. These may need to be defined by the Scrum guidance body. Requirement to set up an environment or working area for the large project, which would then be used by all Scrum teams. Need for coordinating the outputs from several Scrum teams to facilitate release for a large project. For Scrum Masters, need for collaboration between Scrum Masters when addressing impediments and for synchronizing the work of the multiple Scrum teams. For product owners, need for collaboration between product owners when working with business stakeholders, refining the prioritized product backlog, and working with Scrum teams. It is also important to note that as Scrum is scaled for large projects, additional supporting services may be needed, such as architects, product managers, compliance, information security, governance bodies, etc. That's all from this introductory module on scaling Scrum for large projects. Thank you for learning with us.